thank you all for coming. And this is our third and the 41st CISO Roundtable we've been hosting since we started back in 2022. So right now, and we try to host it every month and focus on a lot of these new topics and what's happening in the industry and bring in our industry expert friends. And so we have today our panelists are Randy, Arsalan, and Manish. So we try to bring in, from a technology side as well as the CISO sides. And so there are a few areas we focus on. Some of you have been there before. So one is, just generally how the whole this CISO's roles have been evolving. I know some of you have heard those who have been there in the past. And then we focus on the current topic of interest that's happening in the industry. So with that, we'll just get started. So let me introduce myself. My name is Naveen Bist. I'm the founder and CEO of Akitra, and we are a compliance automation platform and company. And I've been in the security industry also for a number of years. With that, let me introduce our first panelist here. We have Arsalan, who is a CISO at Graphiant. And so Arsalan, it'll be great to hear a little bit, if you can elaborate on your wonderful background for the audience.
Hey everyone, name's Arsalan Khan, like Naveen mentioned. I am the CISO at Graphiant. What we do is essentially we're an agentic infrastructure company, mostly focusing on the network and connectivity space. So building out infrastructure that you can operate autonomously, how do you connect agents into your infrastructure to minimize the work that you have to do in operating your connectivity. So really looking forward to the conversation, given how critical of a layer the infrastructure is, how are agents going to operate in this space, what that all looks like. My previous background is before this, I was part of the backbone and edge team at Meta. So again, really large scale, any outage that happens affects millions, if not billions of people. As we start looking into this agentic world, what does that mean for us? How do we deploy all of this? And how do we do it safely, given how quickly things are changing? So really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Arslan. And then we have Randy Barr. So Randy has been CISO since the advent of SaaS, and right now he's in the front of the security area. So Randy, it'll be great to have you introduce yourself to the team.
Sure, otherwise known as Randolph Barr online as well. I'm a CISO for Sequence Security. And what we do over there is we protect applications that power enterprises in this agentic era that we're about to talk a little bit more about today. But we ensure that data is only accessible through legitimate users, partners, and AI itself. So we work on keeping the bad actors out, essentially. As mentioned, I've been in the security space since early in my days, way before even cloud, for over 25 years. And been working at mid and enterprise companies along my career path.
Thank you, Randy. Really appreciate it. And Randy has been there a number of times, almost once a year. So we appreciate you coming in again and bringing new insights to all our attendees. And then we have Manish. Thank you. And we have Manish Sahu. Manish is founder of Ferentine, brings a tons of experience from security companies, most recently at Zscaler. He's working on some cutting edge stuff at his new startup. So Manish, great to provide a little bit more color to your background for the audience here.
Absolutely. Thanks, Naveen. Hi, everyone. I'm Manish Sahu. I'm the founder of Ferentine. We built the industry's first AI security services edge. And this is to enable zero trust access to large language models, MCP servers, some AI agents. Prior to starting this at Ferentine, I was at Zscaler and Okta, responsible for the third-party access portfolio, including privileged access to critical infrastructure. So as we all know, agents are a thing. They're not only untrusted, almost like third-party access, as well as privileged. So bringing in my unique insights into solving this problem for the agentic era.
Thank you, Manish. So let's start with our first theme, just more on CISO is probably more appropriate for Arslan and Randy. So it's, how do you see this all, the CISO's roles have been evolving with the pace of innovation, which is even going almost like exponentially, right? 1 month, 2 month away, you feel like you're so far behind if you're not keeping up to date with what's happening in the market right now with all these AI agents and all kinds of things. So Randy, how have you seen the CISO's role have evolved and where do you see it's going now?
Yeah,
Over.
it's an interesting space we're in. So when I started out in 2000, the threat landscape was completely unrecognizable compared to today. So before it was defending perimeters, patching servers, writing firewall rules. The job was really hard, but we had enough time to think about it and how to respond to it and really do good work around that. So one of the things I like to do is compare it to Blockbuster as a reference point. So if you think about it, Blockbuster had 9,000 stores worldwide, and today they only have one left in Bend, Oregon. And the narrative that we hear about that is that Netflix and streaming killed them. But what really happened was the combination of crushing debt, quiet erosion of foot traffic to Redbox kiosk. And most critically, they failed to pivot when the window was still open. They saw the signals, but they just didn't move fast enough, or maybe they just didn't do anything at all. In cybersecurity, I have also had to pivot too, many times, from perimeter defense to cloud security, from signature-based detection to behavioral analytics, from compliance to risk. So each of those shifts gave me time to adapt, build new skills, and also bring my team along with me. But what's different now is that, and what really keeps me up at night now is the speed. AI is just compressing that adaptation window in ways I haven't experienced before. So now I'm operating on several fronts. So I need to get in front of product and engineering teams to actively build AI that actively builds AI into our platforms and make sure security is in that design conversation. And it's a different type of conversation than the traditional shift left. I need to work with IT to get in front of internal AI adoption before shadow AI becomes the next shadow IT. And I need to elevate my own education in AI, not just the threats, the architectural, the failure modes, or the governance gap, but I also need to bring my team up to speed, which is very important because I can't be effective without my team executing on that strategy. So, if I can't pivot fast enough in time, I'll be looking for a new job, and I'm pretty confident that there are not that many open positions over at Bend, Oregon, at that Blockbuster store.
Thank you, Randy. Nice way to put it. Arslan, how about you? Uh, how do you see the CISO's roles have evolved since you've been in the industry, and where do you think it's going?
It's very much like Randy said. The biggest thing now is speed. And it's not just limited to, the CISO role, applies across the board. I feel like it's just an area where we haven't had to deal with that kind of pace the same way other areas might have had to. And now we're seeing a pretty crazy acceleration happen in that space. So one of the interesting trends that I've seen over the last 4 to 5 years is conversation around security and has changed a lot from security and compliance being two different things to, okay, we can't look at these as separate things. All of this is going to come together. As that acceleration has been happening, now we're starting to see, okay, your agents are going to show up. These agents are going to behave like people. Software and people start to become less and less distinguishable. That big piece that changes of, I do need to give people permissions to do a lot of things to do their jobs, but I also want to make sure that I don't give them too much power where they make a mistake and it's going to cause all sorts of issues. That speed and power that people need to be given to do their jobs, but make sure they're not going to cause problems, that becomes a very interesting area to deal with. And like Randy said, the big part that's changing with speed becomes, previously you would think about, okay, I've secured my perimeter, I'm good. I've built my walls up, I should be safe for a few years. If I see a problem, I'm going to go patch it. That is no longer true because AI is thinking up of problems faster than we can counter them. So we have to get a lot more aggressive in how we deal with these things. So we have to become a lot more proactive compared to historically, you could build walls and then, react to issues as they happen.
Yeah. Thank you, Aslan. So Manish, I don't know if you have any take on, I know you've been kind of more on the other side than being a CISO, more on the product side and developing. So how do you see, what have you seen during your, days in the past at Zscaler or here, how the roles of CISOs have evolved? And I'm sure you probably worked with a number of them.
I would say there's an entire transformation underway in a way. We are having to incorporate agents into the workforce, and we need to think about how to incorporate them. You're starting to see really lean companies taking on giants, and that all happens because of this transformation which is underway. And it's not all blue skies. Um, you know, people are YOLOing out there. They are generating vibe coded applications and putting it out there, and the onus is on us to kind of secure those applications or to secure that infrastructure. And that's not an easy job either for CISOs or even for somebody who's creating products out there. Even if you built the product out here, you never know if there was a supply chain attack and any of those dependencies now has a vulnerability. So you constantly have to be in the loop, constantly updating yourself because the time to an attack has dropped drastically. And we as a security company cannot afford to be in the news for any of the wrong reasons because trust is what we depend upon. And once we get a bad check mark against our name, we might as well shut down shop.
Thank you. So let's move into the main key topic today, where we wanted to focus the MCP protocol side and other stuff. So basically, what's happening, as you all know, I mean, last week was RSA, and so many of you probably were there. At least I met some of them, like Arunis and some of the folks. So as you know, everything was about agentic AI this year. Last year probably was generative, and and it's evolving very fast. So what's happening is the way, at least I look at it, AI in the enterprise is crossing a critical threshold, and we are no longer kind of deploying systems that simply generate content, but we are deploying systems that take action, right? So fundamentally breaks our existing security model. For decades, like we have built security around a simple assumption, human initiate systems execute, right? So identity, access control, audit logs, all were designed around that flow. But with now autonomous agents, that model kind of collapses and software is deciding what action should take, not just executing. So the question is no longer who has access, it's what actions are allowed and under what conditions and how do we enforce that in real time. So with that kind of context, you begin to think about all the other issues, is that whether an agent having excessive permissions is far more dangerous than an imperfect model or what? So with that, how about I'll just ask Randy if you want to kind of begin to delve into that side, and also I know you've been involved with it, so we can get our discussion going.
Yeah, I mean, so if we think about MCP, it's very useful because there's a common protocol layer for how agents connect to tools and data sources. And we needed that standard because without it, every team is building their own integration, inconsistent security posture. But standardization also means that when you find a gap in that protocol, that gap exists everywhere, and that where that protocol is deployed. So the security risks that I watch out more closely with MCP are around trust inheritance, kind of what you shared earlier, Naveen. When an agent connects to a tool through an MCP server, the assumption is often that the agent inherits the permission of the user who authorized it, but that authorization chain can be manipulated. So a compromised MCP server becomes a pivot point for every tool it brokers access to. And the inventory problem is real, actually. So most security teams right now couldn't tell you with confidence how many MCP servers are running in their environments, what tools they expose, or what data flows go through them. You just can't secure what you just don't have mapped at a minimum.
Arslan, would you like to also touch base on it?
Yeah, for sure. So again, there's definitely a lot of value to MCP servers. They're almost like the API layer, where if you look beyond enabling LLMs and agents, it's the fact we have a central place to get visibility, to put in controls as we need. If you look at one of the really good things that Protobuf did for application communication was the fact it gave you common infrastructure. So when you wanted to enable encryption, you could just enable it on gRPC. You didn't have to go to every single application to do it. That capability showing up in a more centralized form is very helpful. And then when it comes to permissions, like Randy was mentioning, if you think about AI not as an extension of the user, but as someone who works for the user. So if you have a team member, you're not automatically going to give them the same permissions you have. You're going to give them different sets of permissions based on what their capabilities may be, what roles they need to essentially fill. Because of that, having this layer makes a really big difference, both from just standardization perspective, as well as auditability. How are we going to push updates? Having that centralized layer, it makes a really big difference, at least from a security point of view as well.
Okay, thank you, Arsalan. Manish, you've done a lot of work in this MCP and that area, so I think it'll be great to hear your perspectives and also pros and cons. I mean, lately I've seen that MCP also hitting its own limitation, and folks are talking about why it may not be useful in what it was envisioned as. And how do you, I mean, it'll be great to hear your perspective and insights. What do you think of?
No, absolutely. As Randy mentioned, MCP is a fantastic protocol to plug in your data and your applications and your tools. No more bespoke connectivity. It's what they call the USB-C. But just remember, it's just barely 1 year old. So everybody's still learning about it, right? Everybody's finding something and they're finding some deficiencies. And in a few months, there's a new model update from ChatGPT and Claude, which have addressed all the limitations of the previous models. One of them happening to be in order for you to call a model, to call an MCP tool, you need to know the schema of it, and that burns tokens. But if you look at the new models which have just come out, it's a one-time hit. So things are moving fast, but for this protocol to be still successful, to have gotten so much of adoption across different verticals, really speaks about the power of this. And I think we should continue to go all in. MCPs is not just a connectivity mechanism, it's also a huge security mechanism. It allows you to delineate what permissions are needed for each tools. So it is absolutely essential for the least privileged access, especially for keeping your agents in check. So that's my one-liner about what MCPs are about and where it will be going to in 2026.
Thank you, Manish. Anyone who's working on this area from the audience want to talk about it? Maybe you can introduce yourself, a couple of lines, and say something. Arunesh, you're on mute if you want to participate.
Yeah, actually, I'm driving right now, and my mind is more on the road, but I'm more in the listening
Okay.
mode today.
Yeah, no worries.
But one thing that I want to actually talk about when the initial part of the conversation was the role of the CISO itself, right? How it's complicating, and I'll probably try to actually come back to MCP. Again, fortunately, unfortunately, I'm in the cusp of being a fractional CISO and also working or building a platform, right? So I understand all the nuances that a CISO used to care about and what they have to actually be aware of. It's an insane journey for if you are in a security profession these days, right? Whether you're a CISO or you're a practitioner, there are so many things that you need to know, needs to have all those things on your fingertips. You cannot be dependent on Claude or anything else to actually figure out when something is happening, right? When something is going wrong. And the amount of tech that you need to know is insane, right? I mean, like every single day, if I'm speaking to any of my client itself, I'm scratching my head like, okay, yesterday I was talking about this one, today I'm talking about something different, right? So companies don't have a tight control of what they are using. And I see this over and over again, right? yesterday we were talking about MCP, now we're talking about different agents and different stuff, right? So discovery is a very big challenge for organization. Like if you are maybe a 10 people company, you can have like a tight control, but you go beyond like 100 people company, you'll start losing track of like what you're consuming within your organization itself, right? And again, it might, I'm not sure about the statement that I'm going to make, how many people will resonate with it. People are saying like MCP is thing of the past, right? I think the people are still talking about MCP and MCP security, but there are much bigger challenges that have cropped up in the last 4 months. And again, there might be other folks who are like more well versed on the MCP security than I am, but love to actually hear from others. Sorry, I cannot come off camera because it's going to be all dark.
Yeah, so no, please be safe. Randy, I think you wanted to say something, right?
Yeah, I think something that was said about tight controls of what the users are doing. I think what's also important as security professionals is we also need to understand what the agents are doing. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, and so those agents are an actor in our environment. So if a bad actor can get in front of it, they can do some real damage. And so we mentioned the other day that there's a actual peer-reviewed evidence exactly how this plays out. So in a research paper, Agents of Chaos, people got together from Harvard, MIT, Stanford, and they ran an autonomous agent in the live environment for 2 weeks. They gave them access to email, shell execution, persistent memory, and they documented 11 failure modes, none of which required jailbreak or sophisticated exploit. For example, one agent refused to share files containing social security numbers and medical records as it should, but then it immediately complied when the same request was worded as forward instead, and then that information was released. So in those cases, agents reported the task was completed, but the system had already been compromised. And so if you really think about it, these aren't model failures. These are they're system level failures that are merged the moment you give agents persistent memory, tool access, and delegated authority.
I just want to add to what Randy said. The paper, I've been through it as well. Seminal paper is called Agents of Chaos. It deals with OpenClaw, and I think OpenClaw is going to be referenced in all the academic papers going forward about what can go wrong with agents. The founder, Peter, who created OpenClaw, who was pretty much against MCP in the beginning and only resorted to using CLIs and using browser and Playwright to access the tools, pretty much acknowledged right now that MCP is the way to go. So some of that learnings of that paper will be revised once they start incorporating MCPs itself, because it addresses some of the least privileged access requirements, which you don't get with any of those basic toolings.
Anyone else wants to provide their insights or the questions you have, team? Abhijit, Sid, Matt, Padma, or anyone? So what is, anyway,
Naveen,
go ahead.
Question.
Go ahead, Matt, please. Yeah.
So I'd love to hear the thoughts around, agent to agent or, autonomous agents. So, right now everything's designed as if some human is in the loop. But what if there is, how are we thinking about that, when agents are transacting with agents directly?
Who wants to take it on?
Matt, I'll encourage you to read the Agents of Chaos paper. It just tells you about everything which can go wrong. It's pretty much what agentic behavior is. It's acting on events like an email coming in to your inbox. And it's pretty much giving you data along with instructions about what to do. And those are real world behaviors which kind of give you an idea what will happen if those agents are running in the wild. And it is absolutely correct. The real world behaviors are very hard to model, especially because it's not MCP. It's the way these LLMs work. You are mixing control with data in the same context, and things can go wrong. And there are a lot of companies got a whole bunch of funding in the last year on prompt injection. And I'll be honest with you, you cannot solve for prompt injection. It's a large language problem. And to just prove it out, everybody's built classifiers based on English. Suddenly you have text coming in Unicode, it's coming in Cyrillic, it's coming in Devanagari, and it seeps through the cracks. Forget about these different languages. You can even use, Hinglish, which is Hindi or in the Latin text. Your classifier doesn't understand it, but your large language knows how to process it. So anybody who thinks a prompt guard and AI guard is going to solve this is horribly wrong. And so what do you do in this myths is you fall back to first principles, which is least privilege access. What is the least amount of agency which an agent can have? And then you can confidently build upon it. Start with read-only read-only tools, then read-only trusted tools. Once you're mixing in public data, third-party MCPs, emails, or just browsing by default, their trust level goes really down. So these are some caveats I would talk about going full agentic right now. Even with just an open class system, things can go horribly wrong.
Thank you.
I would say, like, as we look at agent to agent communication or all of the changes that are happening, the first thing all of us kind of know is we are not prepared for what is happening. As we go through it, we're going to learn more and make better systems. So, like you mentioned, not having a human in the loop, that's definitely a doable thing while recognizing that there are certain escalations where a human should get involved. Do I want one of my agents to be able to go in and upgrade servers? Absolutely. When it shows up and says, I'm going to upgrade 5,000 servers, at that point, somebody should notify me as to what is going on here. So are we monitoring what they are doing? Bring in humans into the loop when things reach a certain critical stage. We've gone through this process with people in the past, right? When tooling came out initially, when we were writing scripts to upgrade servers, there were no real checks. You just relied people didn't do silly things. Then we realized, yes, people do silly things, so we're going to put in guardrails. We're going to go through the same thing just on a really short time frame of every month we're going to discover 100 different crazy things that happened and try to build guardrails around them.
Yeah, totally.
Thank you.
Sorry, someone was saying something.
Yeah, can you hear me, Naveen?
Yes, Sid,
Yes.
go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, I think it's very interesting stuff because I think that's what one of the things that I had in mind for particularly security practitioners and CISOs. Are there any sort of published report or, of course, whether you've compiled any sort of guidance for like the adoption of Agentic AI framework, like because we talked about certain things that we may start with and gradually kind of roll that out or expand across the different use cases. Is there anything that, from an enterprise, I'm not talking about small companies or startups, and I'm talking about enterprises, is there some sort of a guidance in terms of how they should be in adopting Agentic AI? What are some of the use cases and workloads they would probably need to try these out first and get some learnings out of it and know how to kind of manage when as you start to loosen, the grip and let agents do a lot more autonomous things? I'd like to kind of get some perspective, from the group here.
All right, thank you, Sid. So next, one of the in a scenario, for example, let's say if an AI, for the analysts and the team here, if an AI agent in your environment executed a perfectly valid action tomorrow, but in the wrong context, so do you think could you detect it in real time? Do you have in today's scenario and stop it mid execution, and then you have to explain it to your senior team or the board? Or would you only discover it after the damage is done? So it's more like thinking from architectural perspective. Have you given any thoughts to things like that? So Manish, you want to start off?
Absolutely. So I want to talk about a transition, which Randy spoke about, starting with a parameter. We moved to an identity as a parameter, starting about zero trust techniques from Okta and Ilk. What we are now moving towards is something granular called intent-based access. And this ties into what, Naveen, you're talking about, is an action might trigger, but what is the intent, right? Was the intent triggered with someone saying, summarize my email? or is an intent trigger based on, hey, look at my CRM and do something with it. So it is very important for you to understand the intent and correlate the action. You're not just auditing MCP tool call logs. You're tying this into what was the originating application and what it triggered based on the LLM calls to do, right? So you're absolutely correct. Intent is again going to be a very big focus of 2026. It's a big large language problem, but there are a lot of companies, including ourselves, which are focusing on this intent-based access.
Randy, do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, so tabletop exercise is important. You got to have your playbooks. There are tools today that can help detect some of these activities. I know of one of them very closely. And so centralizing management of all of those traffic and understanding what the behavior is. And I think that's the focus we're going to be seeing a lot more of, is what are some of the behaviors of some of this traffic. Some of the things that people talk about are the preventative side around zero trust that I'm hearing a lot more often. But the way zero trust was initially implemented by a lot of companies is that it was designed for, it wasn't designed for agents. But the framework is there, and you could probably leverage some of that to be able to implement some of the permissions that you give to some of these agents. But yeah, tabletop exercise, continuous review of your incident response that incorporates some of the potential scenarios where that type of incident happened is very important, because some of these agents can gain access fairly quickly without even notice.
Arslan or anyone else?
Yeah, just going to echo what both Manish and Randy mentioned. Easiest answer to your question of can you easily figure it out today? I would say no. Unless you have all of the architecture in place, unless you build things properly, and you are using cutting edge tools to try and figure this out, you're probably not ready for it. You're not going to get a lot of time to get ready for it because things are moving very quickly. A lot of it does come down to, are we setting things up the right way when we start out, or are we playing catch up? If you're playing catch up, there's no way you're going to know about this stuff happening.
Yeah, I think we're always going to be in catch up.
Looks like you reached your destination. You're on mute. So do you have any, like, from in terms of your own experience of working with some customers or these situations right now in the early discussions, if you want to share? Arunish, you're on mute.
Just 1 second. My wife just pinged me. Sorry, just 1 second.
All right, we'll get back to it. Okay, so I know, Manish, you I think put it in the chat. If you want to talk about it, you can quickly.
Yeah, there are a lot of people giving a lot of thought to this. I wasn't, as a company, just trying to follow what the Gartners and Forresters are doing. It was, starting with first principles. What do we know? We got a trio. We got an agent, we got LLMs, and we got tools. And what's the most secure way to kind of stop to prevent that action? And what I learned was, our existing firewalls, our existing SSEs, existing SWIGs are too coarse-grained. They're all at the host level, and the host is a proxy of an authenticated user who's logging into their workstations, laptops, right? And now you're going to a world where you got, lots of agents in your machine. You could have a Claude, you could have a Gemini CLI. In Claude itself, you could have sub-agents, and you could have agent swarms. So these solutions would have a very coarse-grained view about the LLMs and the MCPs being accessed. So all your shadow AI will tell you, yep, you're getting access to the Box and Asana. But what is more important is it's your Visual Studio Code, which needs access to GitHub, your GitHub Copilot, which needs access to Salesforce. But if you combine the two, then you get a toxic combination called toxic flow, which is very important to take care of. Because like I said, once you mix untrusted data with trusted data and trusted tools, that's when damage can happen. That's when the negative aspects of a agentic solution really magnify. So I decided to build this a company just because we needed a finer gauge granularity to control those nodes and those interactions.
So leading that to another question is, most organizations today, I mean, they could tell you that who accessed the system, but not why an action was taken, right? And whether it should have been allowed in that moment. So in an autonomous world, as you envision, so that's not a logging up, there'll be a governance failure. What do you think about that? So Randy, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it would be a governance failure, but I think a lot of us are not prepared for how we're managing through this. We're seeing a lot more non-human identities that's coming in, and when they are, you can't really associate it. It's hard to associate it with who the owner of that is. In addition to that, some of the traditional security platforms that we have today, like SIM and standard API logs, endpoint monitorings, they're really designed around human events. And they're usually predictable patterns too. So agent activity is higher volume. It's at machine speed. We hear that often. And the signal to noise ratio is brutal. You can't really filter through all of that. And so I think what is needed is a purpose-built, solution that can look at the agentic AI activity, and it really looks at the behavior of what it's doing just to make sure that you fully understand if it's meant to do what it was supposed to do, and whether or not it's whether it's an attack or not.
How about Arslan? Like yours.
Yeah, the similar concepts, right? Where what we have today does not work for agents. Their behaviors are similar enough to people when you talk to them, but their behaviors are considerably different if you're looking to monitor and see if they're behaving properly. There's also different considerations that you have to look at, where if a person's doing their job and you feel like what they're doing is slightly different than what they do day in and day out, you don't always cut off their access. In the case of an agent, you'd rather be safe than sorry. So the rules that we're going to apply, we have to apply them differently to agents. And we don't have all of that tooling built today. It would have to be purpose built specifically for these new kind of behaviors.
Yeah, and what's interesting is when I look at a lot of the vendors that are out there today, a lot of the traditional vendors that's been around, they say they have AI, but it's bolted on. And so I think what I'm favoring more, what I'm seeing that's better out there are the newer companies that have AI architected into their product, not something that's just added on, because it's hard to be able to figure out if the traditional solutions that we have in place can actually solve the problem that we're experiencing now. A lot more than new AI companies are. There's a lot, by the way, as most of you know. There's just a ton to be able to filter through, and I just hope all of them can talk to each other. Hopefully, we can get some type of protocol that allows for us to do that, which I think we're starting to see more. But I think the biggest issue is we really need to revisit all of our tech stack, understand what is it that actually does the work based on the threats that exist today, because that threat changes very, very quickly, unlike how it used to protect our security programs before.
So looks like Abhijit has raised a hand. Abhijit, please go ahead, introduce yourself and what's the
Thank you.
question?
I had two questions actually. So one is when we talk about these agentic workflows and the security challenges, do they differ when we're talking about agents which are working on the desktop of the user vis-a-vis agents which are working autonomously on the server side, right? Which would be part of the, let's say, the enterprise workflows. That's one. And secondly, if you can give real life examples of agents or agentic workflows that people have put in production, because the reason why I'm asking this question is, a lot of people are talking about it, but I personally feel that there is still these challenge of hallucination, agents going wrong. So I'm looking for, like, are there real life examples where people have put these in production, these kind of agentic workflows which are autonomously working? If you have any examples, would love to hear. Thank you.
I can go first. Abhijit, what we are seeing is a transition from a human in the loop to human on the loop. What is human on the loop? In OpenClaw, when you send a message on your favorite WhatsApp or whatever messaging. It's an event to the agent on the system to do something. And you can go and get a cup of tea or do whatever workout, and the agent finish what it's doing and gives you back a response. So we definitely made some strides there. Regarding full agentic, that's also very event driven. Like in our case, if we ever see a core dump or we see any stack traces in any of our UI, it is automatically triaged along with the code base, along with whatever core. The agent which does the triage, it makes the changes and creates a PR in GitHub. So we've been doing this from the beginning. We are an AI native company where we are augmenting our human workforce with an agentic workforce. And this is a godsend because we don't work 24/7 like the agents do, but in the morning you got a PR and you can review the PR, which is still a human in the loop, and you can say, yep, I agree to this and let's go and push it. Right. So we still haven't gone full agentic. There's still a human in the loop who can sleep at night and just press the button to review and be done with it.
If you're looking for a big example, AWS had an outage, actually a couple of outages over the last month or 2 months in their Kiro service, where essentially an agent was responsible for monitoring what was happening in their environment. At one point, something went wrong, and the agent said, you know what? The best way to recover this is I will recreate this environment. Now, it shouldn't have had the permissions to recreate a production environment, which is human made a mistake. But the agent still thought, you know what? I'm going to do a good job and I'm going to destroy and recreate this environment to fix all of your problems. So it's happening in production where people don't have all the guardrails in place.
Sounds like another research paper in the making.
Mm-hmm. So moving on to just like a thought-provoking question is, so you think you agree that LLMs are not your biggest risk, but your over-permissioned tools are? What are your thoughts, Randy?
So I really do think that it's not the tools, the LLMs, or just the tools or the LLMs that you have to protect. You now have to protect your apps, your APIs, the agents that connect to your business, and guard access. And you really got to guard access to your crown jewels. We're going to hear a lot of people say, "I'll just protect the laptops from this." Though the laptop was the old perimeter. Now you move down to, then people said it's the users. Well, the users would make mistakes, not because they did it on purpose or anything like that. It's because there are tools, there are controls that could have been put in place that we didn't put in place. And so when I talk earlier about speed, we have to think about all of that stuff now. It's accelerating at a pace that most of us can't keep up with. If we look at the traditional vulnerability management, when you say the remediation period, for heavily regulated environment for critical is within 24 to 72 hours. It's even 24 to 72 hours is too long, especially at the pace that some of these agents can run, and how bad actors now, if we look at the cloud code leak, bad actors are trying to figure out how some of these interact and how they might be able to get around some of these controls that are in place. And so I think part of this is, now that that information is out, bad actors are going to try to figure out how to come up with ODAs to be able to start attacking companies. This is a real big issue for a lot of us that implement some of these agentic implementation and also rely on Claude for a lot of this stuff. So it's the protection is at all layers. We used to focus more on the perimeter. We're getting close to the users. Now we get to the actual applications, the APIs, and all of those fun little things that are happening on your device. Now, what's also interesting is I went over to Apple Store over the weekend to buy an accessory, and so the person said, I was talking to the salesperson and I told her I worked in IT generally, and she goes, "Oh, are you here to buy a Mac Mini too to set up your own server farm?" And I go, "Is that really a thing?" And she said, "Yeah, a lot of people are coming in buying all these Mac Minis so that they can install OpenClaw for their home use, so that their family has their own assistant. And I'm thinking, wow, this is going to be a real big nightmare, especially for people that work remote, employees that work with their systems in an environment like that. What are the potential attacks that are happening there? So we're thinking more about the stuff that we thought about before, but figured that some implementation like awareness is strong enough. We have to do a lot more than that. And we'll probably see a lot more articles and actual compromises coming out of events like that.
Yeah, basically, the real exposure is going to be what the agent can do once connected to systems. I think that's a big.
Yeah, as soon as it figures out your standard username and password to some of your personal portals, how easy can we try that on your work username and password?
Yeah. Manish, do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate what Randall said. Agents work 24/7. They move really fast. If there's a small inch, they'll take it. So I give you an example of the Trivi attack, which has happened. Trivi is a solution from Aqua Secure. People use it, including my company, used it to check for vulnerabilities in our code. And what some agents did, or what the threat actors did, they pretty much overwhelmed the maintainers of that product with an alert fatigue, with GitHub issues. And in between all the noise was some PR, and they took control over that. And now you have the supply chain attack. So it's going to get very messy. You have to come down to really barricading your own solutions. If you're using passwords, good luck with it. I would say go with the standard phishing resistant authenticators. Do what you can do to protect the humans. If you're using secrets, avoid them. Try to use a trusted root of a trusted chain. If you have AWS identity, use that. This is going to be just my general guidance about how to secure your own systems. Don't try to invent your own authentication, because that will get broken up. And these systems are getting so smart, they'll speak their own language. So your Joe sandboxes, which are used to detect malware, zero-day malware, they're either going to overwhelm that infrastructure because they're communicating in some protocol which that sandbox has never seen before, or it can just seep through defenses. So it's going to be very interesting times. The best thing is to clean up the act and adopt those zero trust techniques.
So, it's very interesting because do you think, probably more from Randy, since you also focused a lot on compliance side. So you can say like audit logs kind of are almost dead. So what will become more in the compliance layer will be decision logs, right? So decision logs such as why did the regulators or the board could ask, why did the agent do this, rather than just capturing the log events traditionally. Is that how you think this might evolve into?
Yeah, I'm not sure if the board would be the right one that would go down to that level of technical detail. They're probably more interested in, the amount of budgets you have, what you spend it on. Did you make the right decisions on the tooling that you need to protect against bad actors from? And it's never good to go to a board and say we were attacked, although how many times you can tell them it's not a matter of if but when. And, you can tell them we're not 100% secure until you're blue in the face. But when a bad attack happens, that's when everybody starts criticizing the company. So reputation is the item that you have to pay attention to. So making the right decisions on the tooling, the tech stack that you have is important. GRC is probably something that's more relatable to a lot of the board members, unless you have a good, strong, technical, security conscious board member. But when you go to the CTO and CIO, who should now be your peers at this point, and hiring structure and all that, we can have a different conversation on. But we need to be able to partner with them and make sure that together we're making the right decisions for the company.
Arslan, how about you? Last words?
I wouldn't go as far as saying audit logs are going to disappear. I would say give them steroids. Give them as many steroids as you can, because you want them to do a lot more than what they're doing today. It needs to be built on top of that. And just the conversation around, getting hacked. Over the last 5 years, we've seen this conversation change from not getting hacked to everyone getting hacked. Question of how badly, how quickly can you recover? That's something we also saw just in terms of availability infrastructure over the last decade or so. We started from a point of going, my infrastructure will never go down, to realizing, you know what? Every infrastructure goes down. It's a question of, can you minimize the impact and how quickly can you recover? And we're going to see the same thing happening in the security space, right? The two most important things become, how quickly can you detect you are being breached, and how quickly can you stop it? So if it's someone in your network, someone outside your network, no matter who it is, detect it quickly, lock it down. Expect you will get breached. How quickly you can respond, that's what we focus on.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note that there are certain logs you absolutely want to have access to. But it's also important to make sure you have logs just so that you can do your follow-up investigation and make sure that you have all of the right information before you can say we're done. We've actually closed this out. So the importance of logging is still there.
Thank you. So we have only a couple of minutes left. So anyone else have any questions, or you wanna your insight, Derek, Hiram, those who haven't, Apurv, Pete, Shokai, Ravi, I'm just naming out the folks here, Rana, Andre, Santu, Rohan, Padma, and Sharath, and Steve. Please feel free. It's your opportunity. Any questions you want to ask or share your experiences around this topic?
I'm gonna have to think about it first, Naveen, and get back to you.
All right, Steve.
But this has been a great discussion. I really appreciated it. Brings up lots of important issues. Thanks.
I appreciate you joining. So Ravi, Lingarkar, or anyone else? Apurva, you have, I know you're.
No, nothing from my end. I did have some questions earlier. I think we kind of covered them in some sort of order, but I'll just reiterate it because I think it's a good point. I think more than a couple of years ago, the industry kind of coined the term of just-in-time access for individuals, right? So I also wanted to ask is, how do we take that principle and apply it to agents, right? Is another agent to make the decision on whether its peer agent should have a certain permissions for a certain amount of time? Or when do we determine that, okay, a human needs to step in? Manish, specifically, I think you were talking about agents making changes on servers, right? 10,000 servers at one point. Obviously, that's something that a human needs to grant the permissions on, but similar to how an on-call developer needs just-in-time access, how do we handle on-call agents that are on-call 24/7 actually getting those permissions granted to them?
I think it was Arslan who spoke about 1,000 servers. Arslan, you want to take that?
Yes, absolutely. So I think part of the problem with agents is they're unpredictable. What we do need to do is make them predictable. So if you're going to have a human in the loop, it doesn't have to be 24/7, right? For the human to give permissions, what we do have to look at is agent defines what it's going to do. And that actions that it's going to take, those need to be deterministic. So when you give it permission and you know it's going to do exactly what it told you it's going to do, that becomes a big part of this.
If I may just add to that.
Please go ahead.
So there are three things that come to mind with all of this. One is identity for non-human actors, right? So service accounts, API keys, so auth tokens used by agents need to have the same lifecycle management as human identities, and maybe even stricter. Non-human identities governance is one of those gaps that we need to close. The second thing is we need to establish behavioral baselines, not just signature detections. You can't just write a signature for what agent did when they did something unexpected. You need to know what normal looks like. Which APIs, which volumes, which data, and then flag any deviation from that. And then the last one is the human in the loop, or in the case that was mentioned earlier, also human on the loop, and how you can leverage those two at the right times. So not every agent actually needs approval, but the irreversible or high impacting ones should. So design for confirmation before deletion, for example. Exfiltration or privilege escalation, I think, needs to have that human in the loop. And even when the agent knows what to do, I think is important until you gain that confidence, which I think is going to be a while before you just allow for it to autonomously execute on what you want it to do.
Manish, last,
Yeah.
I guess we are already over time. Please go ahead.
It's a fantastic question about just-in-time access. I'm not a big fan of OpenClaw. I don't believe we need to run a separate server to be able to access. It is a flaw of the system that is requiring to do that. You should be able to apply just-in-time access. If you do get a message on Slack, you should be able to trigger off some events without resorting to what is called standing access. And this is again what Gartner refers to as zero standing privileges. You want to start with zero and build up the permissions, build up to the minimum needed. When a task is done, burn it all down. I feel this is the feature we need to go to. Are there startups like Ferentine which are doing it? Yes, there are. So I'm excited about providing this just-in-time access capability.
Yeah.
That's kind of an interesting
Agreed.
point, Manish, you brought up in terms of OpenClaw, whereas like Jensen Hong, I was listening to his few of the podcasts after the GTC. He was thinking that was the best thing which has happened and will evolve into a lot of
NemoClaw.
applications,
Yeah.
OpenClaw, right? I think some of you probably might have heard him also. Anyway,
Yeah,
so
I guess from a security side, it's not great, right? But from a, technology for everyone, for the everyday user, it is quite a cool thing. So I guess there's kind of two ways to look at it.
Well, NVIDIA did say they came out with a more secure version of that called NemoClaw. So I think that's why he was excited, Naveen.
Yeah, no. All right.
Naveen, one more thing. Apurva, check out Claude channels. With Claude channels, you can now receive messages on those channels, and it's going to trigger events out there. So things are happening, and there is a move from this OpenClaw like architecture to more just in time, and this is going to become strong in this year.
Yeah,
I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah, we can keep going and talking because there's so many things. It's evolving at such an exponential pace, right? Like 1 month, if you don't read through, you'll be probably left behind. So with that, anyway, I'd like to thank everyone. Really appreciate all of you coming first time, and good to see you all. So we'll have next one. Steve, thank you for joining. Sharad, Padma, Santu, Rohan, Andre, Matt, Shokai, Pete, Ravi, Sid, Apur, Ranish, Hiram, Abhijit, Arslan,
Pleasure.
Randy, Derek, Manishi. I'll remember all the names now. All right. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening and really appreciate you joining.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
And we will have the video available in a few days. So I know Abhijit, you had asked that question. So, all right.